everyone, and welcome to my channel. I am ringing in the new year with a major head cold. Hopefully you don't hear it in my voice too much. And apparently it's not COVID. My daughter and husband, who have had it a few days ahead of me, were both tested and tested negative. So I guess it's just an old-fashioned cold. But anyway, I'm excited to play and be creative in a new book I got for Christmas. It's called Gentle Nature. And this is another Greyscale book by Karlon Douglas. So I'm calling it unique because it has a different feel to it than some of the other Greyscale books that I've been working in. I would say the line art is gray shade. It's kind of a warm gray. And the shading in it doesn't have like the degrees of gradients like the other Greyscale that I've been working in. So for example, this would be some of the Greyscale that I've been working in. So it's almost like a colored image was turned into black and white. And so that's why you get a lot of different degrees of Greyscale, where this does not have that same feel to it. So anyway, just a different look. So I was excited to kind of play around in this style. The picture I chose is this one. So there's a lot of these pretty lovely ladies in here surrounded by botanicals. And I was kind of drawn to this one with the fish and the fruit around here. So I was kind of visualizing using more of like brassy or patina types of shades with pops of bright orange and yellow for the fish. Okay, so I'm going to be using mostly the Brutfuner square pencils. I haven't played around with these too much the first time. I wasn't real impressed with them, so I'm interested to see how they work with Prisma colors too. So yeah, I'll be using a combination of Brutfuners and Prisma colors. So here's my color palette that I'll be working with. Here is the Prismacolor pencil. It's like a Celadon green, so kind of more of a bluish, bluish like pale green color. And let's see. Oh, so I am also going to be using some Pebbles chalks too. These are the Classic Chalks 30 Earth Tone shades. So I picked a green that was very similar to that color. And then I'm getting into more of the brassy greens here. Some golden yellows, some burnt oranges. I have a pale yellow Prismacolor to kind of help blend some of these yellows. And then this is kind of like a dark rose color for the lips. And then I have some kind of steel gray tones for the dress, eyes, and the ocean. Again, this is a chalk color, a light tan. I would say it has a slight touch of like a green to there. A dark gray for some darker shadows. And then I am going to be using some Ohuhu Alcohol markers. I have more of a greenish gray for a base shade, and then I'm going to be using a darker gray, kind of a medium, cool gray to help bring some more shadows, like drop shadows inside at the end. Okay, so let's get started. If you want to take a screenshot of those colors, you're welcome to. You don't obviously have to use this brand or these colors, but that will just give you kind of an idea of my color palette. All right. All right, and I'll be coloring on and off camera and doing some at regular speed and sometimes speed coloring, but instructing along the way. I'll come back at the end to discuss my final thoughts. Okay, so the first thing we are going to start with is this arch, and I am going to be using this greenish gray color. It is Ohuhu GG020. And I'm just going to follow along inside this arch. One thing about markers and this paper, you have to be really careful about not getting too close to the edge. You want to get near it, but the ink will bleed kind of up to that edge. So if you're painting on that edge, it could go outside the line. And I don't mean painting. I guess because I'm using a brush edge, I feel like I'm painting, but you know what I mean. Okay, so later on I'll go back and add some color pencil to give it some more shading. Okay, next I'm going to add some chalk here. So again, any kind of chalk would be fine. I just like to do a little bit of a base layer on some things just so the color pencil doesn't have to work so hard. So I'm going to choose this yellow color, and I'm just going to grab one of these little pom-pom here. Let's see. I'll put this so you guys can see the color. All right, so I'm just rubbing it just a little bit on this pom-pom, and then I can rub it on the image. It does not need to cover the whole image because I'm going to be going over with color pencil, and it's mostly going to be an orange fish, but you know, with yellow being more of like a highlight color. But again, this just puts down a nice base layer so the color pencil doesn't have to work so hard to cover. And it's easy to kind of lay down color, and if you don't like it, chalk is super easy to erase and try a different color too. So you can kind of get a feel for what things are going to look like. Okay, oh, and then I think I'll also do her skin too. So let's bring that back out, and I'm going to use this kind of tannish color. It does have like a slight green hue to it. I'm going to start, after I load, I'm going to start in the darkest area first, and because I want the chalk to kind of wear down as it gets to the highlight part of her face. So the higher concentration of pigment will be in the shadows. And then as that chalk kind of wears out, then I can bring it more towards the middle. Okay, and again, I'm going to switch to the little one for the fingers. Okay, and then for a shadow, I am going to, let's see, I think it was, yeah, I think I'll do that one. I think that will be too dark, so I'm gonna do this one. Again, starting at the darkest point and working towards the middle. Okay, I am going to use the chalks, but I'm going to use them a little bit later. So I think I can close this up for now. All right, moving on to the hair. So in here we have leaves and we have these kind of seaweed-like hair strands. So I'm going to be concentrating more on these long strands here. So I'm going to be using the Brutfuner 048. So as look at the size of this. I've only used this on like one other page, so you can see how short it got. And then I'll also be using this 119 and also a colorless blender, which I was using a Prisma colorless blender. It was working fine in my practice ones. And then I'm going to highlight with this kind of golden yellow. So, like I said before with this grayscale, it's kind of a medium kind of warm gray shade. So the color pencil is going to be a lot more dominant when you go over it. So I'm actually going to be using it to kind of trace over the lines to give it more of that green shade. And then leaving a lot of it open or, you know, left open. And then shading in just a little bit. So you can see this page isn't very big, so these little areas are going to be tight to get to. And I'm not doing a perfect trace either. I'm just kind of roughly outlining everything. All right. And so as you can see, as I'm going over it, it just goes right over that gray line and kind of dominates that line, which is different than a lot of other books with black lines. So I'm not worrying about all those little interior lines. I'm just concentrating on the outside. Okay, oh, let me do this one little part here. Okay, so now I have this little section done. Now I'm just going to add just really light touches here, especially on these edges where it's coming from underneath something. And then under here where it would be under the fish. So just light little strokes, like if you were doing hair texture. And underneath this little curl here. All right, and then I'm gonna take this more brassy color, brown, and again, hit in not all the same areas, a little bit different, maybe where there's some deeper crevices, and it doesn't have to be in all of them. I'm just giving it a little bit of a variety of color here. Okay, then I'm going to take the colorless blender, and this just kind of, I'm going to call mooshes all those pigments together, and it spreads it a little bit around, but it mostly just blends that color, kind of smooths it out, because the pencil lines can look kind of rough on here. And I could have done like a base coat of either marker or the chalk like I've done on some of these other shapes, but I just wanted this to have a little bit different feel. Okay, now some of these areas that were left white, now I'm going to come in and use this golden yellow, and I'm just going to I'm going to hold my pencil a little bit farther back, and I'm barely just going to scratch a little bit of this color on top. And the reason why I did this after the colorless blender is because I didn't really want this color to blend in with the other ones. Okay, I just want a little bit of hint of this highlight. All right, so I'll do a few more of these on camera, and then I'll finish the rest off camera. All right, so I finished all of the hair strands, and here is this pencil. That's all I have left after doing all of that. So lots of sharpening with that just to make sure we get into those little areas. Okay, next we are going to work on the leaves here, and that is going to be, I'll be using this Prisma Color 1020. And again, I'm just going to kind of roughly go over the center of the leaves and a little bit of the outlining. I'm not going to be too clean about it. I'm going to be a little bit messy and rough. So, and then instead of using the pencil to fill it in, I'm going to be adding the chalks on top of this instead of before. So again, just using kind of the pattern of the way the veining and the leaves are, but just kind of roughly getting in there. A little bit of light shading with the pencil is fine. Again, I'm not being perfect with this. Concentrating on where the grayscale is showing me to be a little bit darker. Okay, now I'm gonna use the chalks again. And I'm going to use this green right here. So I think I'll do a smaller one. Okay, and this time I'm gonna go over the pencil. Instead of doing this before and then trying to shade in with pencil and stuff. So I still want some varying degree of light and dark areas. So not each leaf has to be completely solid. And it's okay if it goes outside the lines, that's okay. I can always erase that afterwards. Okay, so that is what the leaves will look like. I'm going to go ahead and finish these other ones off camera and touch up that, put some yellow in that orange right there. All right, so I'll see you in a few. All right, so I finished with the color pencil and the leaves. I'll zoom in here just a little bit so you can see. I really wasn't trying to be real clean with it or exact. So that's how that turned out. And now I will add the chalk. All right, and you can see how the chalk gives you kind of that darker and lighter effect without having to use too much color pencil. Okay, we are going to move on to the oranges. So let me pull the colors for those. I'm going to use, let's see, 093. And let's see, this is 025. 022, and then I'll also be using a little bit of the 92 and the Prisma Color 914. So these will be the colors for the oranges and for the fish. All right, I'm going to start with this more golden orange here. And I'm just going to concentrate so it shows you exactly where the shading is going to be. And the lightest color will be up here. So I'm going to start with kind of a medium shade just to build up my colors. So I'm starting kind of heavy pressure and kind of coloring in this U shape here. And I'm lighting up the pressure as I get to the center. All right, and then I'll go to the darker orange here. Same thing, heavy pressure at the bottom, and then a little bit lighter as it's going up. Just trying to add a little bit more orange color in here. And then I'm gonna blend out with this golden yellow, still leaving that very top part untouched. And then I can go in with this lighter Prisma color. And since this is a little bit creamier, it's going to help smooth and blend those colors in together. All right, and then this is the darkest one, so I'm just gonna barely hit this very bottom just to give it a nice shadow here. And you can play around with some of these different colors, going back and forth until you get the right shade that you want. All right, so these oranges, the shading is in different spots, so just pay attention to that. All right, so that's how I'll do the oranges. Let me move on to the fish now, and I'll start with this little fish here. First, I'm going to erase the chalk inside the eyes. I'm actually going to do their eyes in the like blue shades, but I don't want any yellow in there. All right, so for the fish, I think I'm going to have the highlight more up towards the upper center of the fish. All right, so I'm going to start with this kind of golden yellow, and I'm just going to start building up the layers. So I know I want to keep this area the lightest, so I'm going to stay away from there. Just kind of following along some of the lines already provided. And I think the tail, I'll have the tail be darker around here, and then it's going to get lighter as it gets to the edges. Okay, now once I have that, it's kind of giving me a guide of where I want the lightest colors to go. So now I can start adding in some of these darker shades. So this is the 025. This is the brightest of the oranges. And I might go over some of these lines. Again, I'm not trying to be super clean about it. I'm not going to do all of these, just a little bit here and there. And I think this is part of the fish too, maybe his bottom fins. So I'll darken that up a little bit, and then I think it must curl out here. It could be here too, I'm not really sure. I'm just thinking his tail is different than this tail, so I'm thinking this must be like a little fin right here. That's what we're going to make it anyway. Okay, so let me lighten that up here and lighten these up too. All right, so now I'm gonna blend those colors, and I'm just gonna keep building the shading till how I like it. If I want it a little bit more orange or keep it a little bit more yellow, I'll just have to keep playing around, going back and forth with my colors, but maintaining the light area right about there. All right, so I finished all the fish and all the oranges. I'm going to be moving on to the skin and her face and also the eyes of the fish. Okay, so I'm going to use the 119. This is going to be kind of that brassy green color here, and for some of the shading. And then I'm also going to use some of this 025. This is kind of that burnt orange color. I'm going to add a little bit of shadow into her eyes. And then I'll use this 095 for her lips. And then I'll be using Prisma Color 1086 and 936. There we go, 936 for the eyes. And then I do have a dark gray to do some outlining. All right, so I'm going to start with some of the shading. I'm going to do it really lightly. This is a pretty intense color, so I don't want to take away from the chalk shading too much, but I do want to add kind of this brassy color in here. Yep, keeping it really light. Okay, now just a little bit of color on her lips. And since her hair color has some of this brassy shades in it, I'm gonna do her eyebrows in this color too. All right, and then to incorporate some of this orange, I'm going to use it as eyeshadow. A little bit underneath her eyes. Okay, that will hopefully make her eyes stand out a little bit more. And I'm just going to take my blender again and just soften that a little bit. Okay, so now for the eyes, I'm going to outline this in this dark gray, and I want to define this a little bit better since we lose some of the details in the grayscale. And using this dark kind of steel gray, I'm going to come over here on the dark part, and then this right side will be bright. All right, and then if you need to go back over with the gray, okay, so same thing with the fisheye. I'm just gonna kind of highlight or outline around the eye. Really make that center part really dark. And then I'm gonna do the dark gray in the back. And then the lighter in the front. Still keeping that little white highlight there. Okay, there's the eyes, and then if you want to add Posca to really highlight in there, you can too. All right, so sticking with, excuse me, sticking with some of the blue shades here, I'm going to use that for her dress. So I'm going to start out just by adding a really light shade of this blue. A little bit heavier pressure around the edges where there's these thicker lines. Keeping this top part really light, and then I'll go in with this darker shade. Same thing, just concentrating on the edges and some of these lines here. All right, and then back over to blend that out just a little bit more with the lighter blue. All right, for the ocean, same thing. I'm just gonna go light layer all over this ocean part. And I'm going to concentrate the darker towards the back here. And then I'm just going to add lighten the pressure as I get closer to the front of the page here. All right, smooth that out. And I think I'm going to add some green back there too. So I'm going to take this Prisma 1020 and I'm just going to add in a few spots here some of this green. Okay, go back over with that light blue and blend out. Let's see what a white will do. Good, so I just want a little bit of shades of green in there too, just to give it a little bit more ocean water look instead of a bright blue. All right, and same with this landscape, because it's, you know, far away. I don't want it to look too detailed. So I'm gonna just start hitting it with a few different colors, keeping the darker colors towards the bottom. But again, kind of being messy with it. Let's see. Very abstract. All right, and then I'll take the blender and mush all those colors together. And I think I'm gonna go over it with this green, just to dull it out just a little bit. I don't want it real bright. Okay. Good. All right. So now I'm going to, let's see, let's add a little bit of shadow in her eyes too. I'm going to go back to this 1086. And I'm just going to go right here in the corner of her eyes, add a little bit of shadow. Okay, I think I'm going to work on this arch here. So I'm going to take this dark gray. This is a 1067. And let's get into these little crevices here. Okay, working on this stone arch here. So I added some dark gray and then started to blend that out and realized it was a little too heavy. So I just used the electric eraser to get rid of some of that, just so it's not too intense. And then I'm using that kind of bluish gray and then that light gray, kind of pale gray color, just to add some shadows and texture inside this arch. All right, so I'm feeling like this is a little flat now, so I'm going to go in with the darker gray and I'm going to just add a little bit more contrast. So Just be really careful with this stage. You could get carried away. But like I did up here, I could always use the electric eraser to kind of erase some if I get a little too heavy-handed. But I think if we give it a little bit more contrast in some of these dark areas, it won't look so flat. So I think it will give it a good pop. So, all right, so I'll be doing that with this dark gray. All right, so that gave it some good contrast, and now I'm going to take this Ohuhu marker. This is CG050. It is a fairly, I would say, like medium gray, but it still will give a little bit more translucency. So if I go over colors, you still might be able to see a little bit of that color shining through. So this is just going to help soften that dark edge that I just did and create a little bit more softer drop shadow. So see, I can go right over this green and it still allows that green to shine through. So I'm just kind of feathering the edges here. Anywhere else I want to add this shadow, we'll just go right over nicely. Give it. And I'm also going to go over this too, just to mellow out those colors. It looks dark at first, but then it does dry lighter. All right, so I think that contrast just gives it a little bit more depth and makes the different parts pop a little bit better. All right, last thing I'm going to do is take this light blue again, and I'm just going to do a simple coloring of the background. So it will be this light blue. Okay, all the ink has dried. My final thoughts on working on this page. First, I really love the color palette. The brass and patina colors are the perfect complement to the orange shades. It really makes them pop, which is exactly what I envisioned. I kept her pretty simple to let everything else stand out. I like the size of the book. It was very manageable to do this page in a few hours. And all the different mediums, the markers, the color pencils, played well together. So I hope everyone is staying well and happy coloring.